Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Welcome back to our Buffalo Philharmonic concert series. We're happy that you're with us. Tonight, we have a concert program, 3 beautiful pieces, all loosely tied to the concept of remembrance. And we're starting out with a work by Anton ARENSKY. Now, I have to tell you that the Buffalo Philharmonic has never, in all of its life since 1935, played a piece by Anton ARENSKY. So this is exciting for us. He was a Russian composer, child prodigy. He studied with the great Rimsky-Korsakov at the St. Petersburg Conservatory, and then he went to the Moscow Conservatory to be a professor. And he had many famous students there, including Rachmaninoff, Scriabin, and Glier. And in Moscow, he became a very close friend of Tchaikovsky. And he was really deeply influenced by this cosmopolitan composer. Tchaikovsky was the epitome of a way of writing Russian music with Russian style and sound and content, but writing it in the wonderful, urbane, and sophisticated manner of the German-Austrian school. And Tchaikovsky, for his part, was very generous to young composers. He encouraged them, he helped them, he was there for them. So when he died, suddenly and mysteriously, at 53, all of his students were devastated. And ARENSKY wrote the piece that you will hear, Variations on a Theme of Tchaikovsky, in memory of his mentor that he loved so dearly. The theme that ARENSKY chose was actually a song that Tchaikovsky wrote. It was one of his 16 songs for children, and ARENSKY knew that Tchaikovsky particularly loved this song. So you will hear that melody right at the beginning. And after he gives us Tchaikovsky's beautiful melody, then ARENSKY creates 7 variations of that melody. It's a beautiful piece and ends quietly and gently, as if filled with sadness for the loss of his beloved colleague. Next on our program is the Shostakovich Chamber Symphony for Strings. Now, this started life as a quartet, but the version that you'll hear us play is the enlarged version for string orchestra. In the summer of 1960, Shostakovich was sent to Dresden to write the score for a new Soviet propaganda film. The film was about 8 Soviet soldiers who went to Dresden during the war to try to recover precious art that had been stolen by the Nazis. So the composer, to know the situation there, was taken to visit the ruins of the city. Shostakovich was so completely shaken by the devastation that he could hardly work. The destruction that he saw, the suffering that he knew surrounded that, the horror of war became so evident to him that even though he was then put into a studio that had been arranged for him to immediately write that film music, he found that his mind was so full of that horrifying destruction. Instead, he immediately started to write a piece for string quartet, and he finished it in 3 days. And that is this piece that we play. It is one of the most powerful and personal works of the 20th century, dark and troubled. Shostakovich dedicated the score to the remembrance of the victims of fascism and war. It soon became clear that this piece was autobiographical as well. The main theme, and you'll hear it right at the beginning, are actually Shostakovich's initials, and he'd done this in other pieces as well. D for Dmitri, S, C, H. Now, those notes would translate to D, of course. The S in German is E flat, C, and the H in German is B. You'll hear that right at the beginning, boldly stated. And it is in nearly every page of the score. His signature, his 4 initials. the piece also contains small fragments of other works scattered throughout, works that were important to him. They put them in there. His first symphony, his Lady Macbeth of Mtsensk, his first cello concerto. They're all figures in the piece. It was written as 5 connected movements, and overall it is a kind of lament, but it contains moments of brutal force, a strange waltz, a kind of dance of death, slashing chords, a Russian dirge, hints of parts of the Mass for the Dead. There's a lot of desolation in this piece, feeling of inconsolable sorrow. Shostakovich was so undone by this work that he told friends when he had written it that it would be his last piece. It would be the final thing that he could ever write. But he went on to compose other works. But it was as if this work was, in a spiritual way, his farewell to life. He wanted it to be played at his own memorial, and at his request, it was performed 15 years later, in August 1975, at his funeral. We close our program with a glorious symphony by Franz Joseph Haydn. Haydn was in the employ of the Royal Esterházy family most of his life, almost 50 years. Prince Esterházy loved music, and he was also extremely fond of Haydn. So the situation there was really lovely for the composer, and it led to his great musical independence and creativity. Haydn could experiment with the full consent of the prince, and his Esterházy orchestra actually became a kind of musical laboratory. He had very fine players and had an excellent relationship with his musicians. In fact, he composed very often to display the talents of his musicians. And this wonderful situation led to the invention of the string quartet, of which Haydn is considered the father of that form, and also the symphony in the form that we know it. Haydn wrote over 100 symphonies, and his reputation grew until he was acclaimed as the leading composer in Europe, far beyond the small confines of the Esterházy court. At the time that Haydn was writing the Symphony No. 44, which is the one you hear tonight, he was also writing operas for the Esterházy family, and the symphony seems to show this extra sense of drama. It's one of the very few symphonies he wrote in a minor key. It's in E minor, and it has a driving opening, sudden changes of dynamics, pauses unexpectedly, surprising melodic leaps, fast rhythms, syncopation, a sense of overall restlessness, and a furious finale. The only moment of repose is the slow third movement. That is serene, quiet, and calm. And Haydn loved that movement in particular so much that he asked at that time that it be played at his funeral. So that is why the symphony has a title. It's called the Trauer Symphony, the Symphony of Sorrow, or Mourning Symphony, because of Haydn's thought of it being played at the funeral. And it was. It's an emotionally charged work, stormy, dramatic, and a wonderful example of the brilliance and creativity of Franz Joseph Haydn. We hope you enjoy our concert tonight.